Next question. Foreclosures on Maui were pretty grim, with nearly 1,000 single-family homes pending foreclosure. Do you feel the situation has improved with some of the new laws that were introduced?
I certainly do. You know, it's not a perfect fix because we don't have control of all of the situation, but we have seen a slowdown in the number of homes going to foreclosure. The banks and the lending institutions are having to take a really hard look at whether they have all their paperwork in order before they can foreclose. Many of them, because we put a moratorium on the old style of non-judicial foreclosure, have just held off and are thinking about going into judicial foreclosure. But in talking with the real estate community, I'm finding that more of the short sales are happening. More of the bank-owned houses are going into the market, and that can help those who need to find a house. And also we're seeing that the judiciary is really cooperating with the borrowers and honoring requests to go into mediation even if it's in a judicial foreclosure. So even though we haven't had a lot of people in the mediation program that our legislation set up, we have seen that people are being allowed to stay in their homes longer, and that's really what we wanted. We wanted to make sure that the process was fair and that people got a good shake. So if anybody out there is getting a foreclosure notice, they need to respond to that notice. They need to ask for mediation if it's going into the judicial process. And our judiciary is working very diligently to set up their own mediation program that's modeled after the one that we enacted. They had a pilot project on the Big Island a couple years ago. They're going to, bring that back online and beef it up, and they're really working with their judges to make sure that, everything is done as appropriately as it possibly can be. So even though, we know that people still are going to be facing foreclosure, we think that we've done a number of mitigations that are going to help homeowners stay in their homes as long as they can, get a loan modification, get some other payment plan, and work something out that may be to their benefit.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, I think one thing that I've learned in this whole process, watching the foreclosures and learning about how this works, is that, borrowers, get your paperwork together. Because a lot of times the banks don't have it together, and if they don't have it together, when you go to court, you can say, look, this document wasn't properly transferred. These things weren't properly endorsed, properly signed, and it makes a difference. But it's the lender that has to, the borrower, the person that borrowed the money, that has to really keep track of their paperwork. Because we've seen a number of cases where you can see very clearly that the paperwork was not in order, but they're in foreclosure, and the banks are saying we're going to go for it anyway. So it's the best defense is to know what documents are there.
And Alan, and I would like to give credit where credit is due, and I think Maui is very fortunate that Senator Baker has really been the champion of this whole issue. A couple years ago, she passed legislation that created a task force, a working group, to try to come up with specific legislation last year. So you had a lot of industry experts who were at the table. We had a measure. It went through the entire process, and we all know normally a bill takes more than a single session to get passed. To her credit, she was able to get all of her colleagues on board, and have us understand this very complex issue, and pass legislation. And normally what happens after we pass legislation is legislators kind of move on to the next thing. Well, Senator Baker never stopped, and even though that piece of law was enacted as an act, she continued to work, and this task force continued to work together to try to make sure that whatever things could be improved upon on the legislation that was passed last year was. And so, this hasn't been like an overnight thing. This is a little over 2 years, and we really credit Roz. Senator Baker was the one who definitely took the bull by the horns and moved forward on this thing. So, so for people like us, and we can sit here and take a little bit of the credit, but really, we hats off to her. And so she did this not just for the people of Maui County, but for the entire state. So it's a really, really good thing.
Thank you so much, Senator Baker.
Well, there's a little bit more work we've got to do this session, but we'll keep at it.
For our next question, I was hoping we could touch a little bit on our energy projects in Maui. The County of Maui has many sustainable energy projects out there. Can we describe some of the projects out there and how they will benefit Maui?
Wow.
You guys have a lot of sustainable energy projects.
Yeah, we do. I mean, you know, the County of Maui just signed a MOU with Japan for a smart grid study to look at how we can do that in Maui. We have, I know in Peahi, Eric Bryant and others have small scale solar farms, you know, so they're looking at the questions of interconnect and all of these things. Of course, we have wind on Maui. We have Ulupalakua. We also have proposals for Lanai, proposals for Molokai. And, you know, on those 2 points, I mean, wind works for us in Maui. You know, it produces something like, the last numbers I heard were 20 some odd % of our power. You know, Molokai and Lanai are the two different issues, and Lanai is one issue, and Molokai is a completely different one. So let's take Molokai. You know, the proposal for the wind farm on Molokai is to go on to Molokai ranch land, an outside company coming into Molokai ranch land, and producing power and selling that to Oahu. I would say a good 80–90% of the people that I've talked to in Molokai are adamantly against that project. You know, Molokai has said over the years that they want subsistence lifestyle. You know, and I mean, I for one, as a policymaker for Molokai and understanding that they want subsistence, we're saying fine. You know, we don't have to connect Molokai this way. Lanai, well, it's a different issue altogether. The landowner wants to do the wind farms. The population has dropped dramatically on Lanai to the point where we're worried about carrying capacity for that island, whether or not goods and services can be sustained to keep a small population. And the landowner is, you know, contemplating selling the island, is contemplating all sorts of things because he loses lots of money every year on the island. So, you know, that's a different story. And really, we have to keep in mind that connecting the islands by cable is a statewide initiative. And it's really dealing with, you know, connecting Big Island, Maui, Oahu, Molokai, Lanai, maybe. What in the debate that we've had over the last year, what we've not talked about is, you know, we on the neighbor islands need the firm power backup that Oahu provides. We're seeing this on Maui where the grids are reaching saturation. You cannot, in some areas of our grid system, you can no longer do photovoltaic because we've reached too much, can you believe this, too much renewable. We need the firm power that's produced here to allow for our renewables to grow. So, you know, as a whole, the cable initiative, I think, is a good initiative. I think if we have to bypass Molokai, we bypass Molokai. You know, Lanai, it may bring down their power rates quite a bit, and they may have to redo how and where they put the windmills, but it may work on Lanai. And wind is not the entire scenario. So our photovoltaic, our wind, even our wave energy. You know, Maui, in Peahi, there's some experiments on wave energy. And if we look at that and combine all of that, we're going to be producing too much renewables that our firm power cannot back up. So, you know, that's why I'm saying we need the firm power capacity of Oahu to back us up on the islands.
Well, there's some interesting businesses that are really trying to assist. Enterprise Rent-A-Car, as a for instance, is bringing in a fleet of electric vehicles. And so they're looking at how they can find charging stations. And of course, we have a law in the books that requires any place with over, 100 parking spaces has to designate one space as a renewable and put the charging station there. And so that might open up some other opportunities for other businesses to maybe put photovoltaic on their covers over the parking lots, like they did over at 5A Rent-A-Space in Honokauai on my side of the island, making sure that their entire complex, as well as the little strip mall that's next to it, is off the grid, so to speak. And so, you know, there's some of these initiatives that we see happening on Maui, and a lot of our constituents are really very interested in going a little bit greener, going to photovoltaic, but we do run into grid issues. That's why the initiative that the county is engaged with Japan is really important. That's why it may be important to look at the undersea cable just for taking some of that excess wind energy that Maui Island can produce and create that firm backup. But those are all things that are far into the future, and we don't have the programmatic EIS done yet for the inter-island cable. But there's some very interesting renewable energy projects throughout the state. On Kauai, for instance, I think they may well be sustainable, which might be a good thing because we can't get the cable likely over to Kauai because of the depth of the ocean. But I think we're on a good track to, I don't know whether Senator English's vision of when he was chair of energy and the environment of hitting those portfolio standards are going to be realized, but I think we're going to be very close.
Yeah, I think we will, and that's, like what we said, one solution creates a whole set of other problems. So we never anticipated the idea of too much renewables, which is what's happening in some areas of Maui. So, all of us have gotten calls by people saying, I wanted to put a photovoltaic system in and the utility said I could not. The reason is in that particular grid, there's just too many people doing it. So it says that it's catching up, people want to do it, people are happy with it, now we have to increase the capacity to allow it to happen. And
with more and better battery storage. What some folks are saying is if we can, because we have a lot of wind at Kahiava, maybe there's a way to, by storing it, then you could feed it to some of the hotels in Wailea when off-peak hours, and you make it, you use it almost 24/7, because right now you drive by and sometimes the windmills are off even when it's a very windy day because the utility can't take it off.
Excellent, thank you. We're running out of time. Is there any last thoughts that you would like to convey before we close up? We've got like a minute left. Interesting stories that occurred during intro.
Well, we're heading into the next session. We start in a couple of weeks, and we're gearing up. Everybody's here, and the hearings have started. So, we're in full swing. We've had a productive interim. Lots of things happen. We had some very big conferences in Hawaii, APEC, of course, being the largest one. I haven't heard the final numbers, but upwards of over $100 million plus that came into Hawaii's economy, direct spending, and they haven't calculated the indirect spending yet. So we've had a productive interim.
It's been very busy.
And we're cautiously optimistic. I think there were a lot of tough decisions that we had to make over the last several years, and I think finally we're starting to see some of those benefits. I think for the first time in a number of years, we're not going to be chasing a huge budget deficit. Cross our fingers. I mean, we still have 2.5 weeks till opening day, and anything can happen. But I think we're off to a good start. I think the governor's ambitious initiative to float $1.3 billion in bonds was a great sign. I think it shows the credit worthiness of the state of Hawaii, and some of our tough decisions that we made will provide for, I think, a solid foundation as we move forward.
Thank you so much, Senators, for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of Maui Mana'o, and of course, we'll see you next time. Aloha and mahalo.
Aloha. Aloha.